the Special Board of Inquiry constituted by Nigeria's Chief of Army Staff to investigate allegations of extrajudicial killings by officers and men of the Nigerian Army in the Northeast has refuted the allegations leveled against them by Amnesty International. At a news conference in Abuja, the nation's capital, the Army Chief in charge of Civil Military Affairs, Major General Nuhu Angbazo, says soldiers mentioned in the report have been investigated and none were found guilty of human rights abuse. The board raised concerns about the Amnesty International's position, which has led to the suspension of visas of some senior military officers who defended the army on the allegation of human rights violation.
Brigadier General R.O. Bamboye, retired, was Commander 21 Brigade in Giwa Barracks and Land Company Commander from 22nd February 2012 to September 2013. Amnesty International alleged that he was in charge of the barracks during the period when at least 5,000 detainees died in custody and when torture and ill treatment were used routinely. The board noted that most of the military documents used in the Amnesty International report originated during his tenure. However, it was confirmed that the officer was not directly responsible for the detainees, although he was the cantonment commander. The officer served directly under Major General J.H. Nwansia, who was the Joint Task Force commander. The board was unable to separate this officer from the effort by the Joint Task Force commander towards decongesting Giwa Barracks. The board further observed that in all the documents referred in the Amnesty International report and all videos received, none contained any evidence to indict the officer. In view of this and the lack of forensic evidence, the board was unable to substantiate the allegation against the officer.
In Burundi, UN investigators have accused security forces and allied militia of still abducting, torturing and killing people with almost total impunity. Officials say Burundi, a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council, has failed to reply to their letters to the foreign minister, and they therefore have no access to the Central African country where abuses are rarely prosecuted. Burundi's UN ambassador, Renovat Tabu, however, fiercely denied the allegations, saying that investigators are ignoring the government's efforts to restore peace and security. Burundi was plunged into chaos in April 2015 when President Pierre Nkurunziza said he planned to run for a third term, which the opposition said was unconstitutional and violated the peace deal that ended its civil war in 2005. In southern Africa now, about 30,000 refugees have arrived in Angola's Lunda Norte province in recent months as they escape fighting in the Kasai region in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Clashes between the army and armed groups in the country have already displaced more than 1.3 million people internally, with the United Nations also identifying 40 mass graves. Humanitarian agencies fear the situation could develop into a large-scale conflict affecting many more civilians.
According to the government and UN estimates, the number of refugees fleeing to Angola could reach 50,000, with 300 to 500 arriving daily. The UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR, and other partners are seeking $65 million to help the growing number of refugees arriving in Angola. This comes as the Angolan army transports people from border points to the two reception centers in Kankada and Musenge. Refugee centers, however, are already overcrowded and struggling to accommodate daily arrivals. We don't have shelter. We are suffering from malaria. There is no medicine. Most civilians in affected areas are at risk of serious human rights violations, including physical mutilation, killing, sexual violence, arbitrary arrest and detention in inhumane conditions. A number of refugees are arriving in Angola in desperate conditions, many of them malnourished, sick and in fear for their lives.
Immediately we saw the urgent need for coming in and be providing food. People hadn't eaten for almost 2 weeks at a certain point in time. So that has been our first priority.
Angola has hosted refugees from the DRC and other neighboring countries for years. Prior to the recent crisis, Angola was hosting about 15,600 refugees, including others from Central and West African countries like Burundi.
There was war in our village. People died and we fled to come here. We sleep outside with our children. We don't know where to go. We have no houses here, and sometimes the churches help us, but we want to return to our villages.
Analysts fear growing violence in the DRC could spark a repeat of the conflict between 1996 and 2003, mostly in the east, in which millions died, mainly from hunger and disease. President Joseph Kabila's failure to step down when his two-term mandate expired in December has further destabilized the loosely governed country.
Finally, those left behind in the Kasai province are asking the authorities to put an end to the violence. Hundreds have been killed, and as we said before, about 1.3 million displaced people in central Congo since last year in August, in fighting between militia and government forces are running.
Violence has risen nationally since President Kabila decided to stay in power beyond the December 2016 end of his mandate. According to the UN Office for Humanitarian Affairs, the total number of displaced throughout the DRC has more than doubled to 3.7 million since August 2016, with 1.3 million of them uprooted within the Kasai region. Many of those who fled conflict in their villages have sought shelter in Shikapo city, which is located 64 kilometers from the Angolan border, where they say their living conditions have worsened since the conflict began.
There was war in our village. People died and we fled to come here. We sleep outside with our children. We don't know where to go. We have no houses here, and sometimes the churches help us, but we want to return to our villages. We just want to go back to our families.
On Friday, June the 9th, the top UN human rights official called for an international investigation into massacres and other crimes committed in the Kasai region, where at least 42 mass graves have been found. Besides the 42 mass graves, the UN has also documented killings of more than 400 people in Kasai, the focus of the fight against the Kamuina Nsapa militia since August, when security forces killed its leader. The militia has been fighting largely to avenge his death. The call sets up the possibility of a diplomatic confrontation between the United Nations and the government of President Kabila. The government had said it would accept UN technical assistance, but it wants to retain control of the inquiry in response to a June 8 deadline by UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Zeid Ra'ad al-Hussein for Congo to agree to a joint probe.
Nous disons que nous n'avons pas changé de position.
What we are saying is that our position has not changed. On May 4th, I met with the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights in Geneva. I was carrying a message from the President, who wanted to reassure the High Commissioner of Congo's government's will to investigate impunity, to make sure there was transparency in investigations, and to find the truth on what happened in the Kasai massacres.
Well, that's the show. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jaka Rogers. Bye for now.